Upload. Okay, awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI Product Hive Community Call. Today, we will be talking to two awesome founders who started their AI startup. And the topic of our today's call is sounds like terminating the company early, RAG service case study. So please bear in mind that the call will be recorded. So if there is something that you would like to cut out of the video, please reach out to me. And this is our today's agenda. So it's pretty simple as for this specific community call, but it should be pretty packed in terms of information that we can get and discuss. Awful slide in terms of quality of the images on the slide, but we are reaching out. We're moving towards 1K community members in our Slack, and also our search results are basically blowing up. So we are hitting the record over record because we have not actively invested in our SEO, but the results are pretty cool. So please, if you've got folks who are into AI or who are running their software startup, or they are working in a tech company and would like to figure something out regarding the artificial intelligence, please feel free to recommend our community. We really don't mind if you'll do that. Please meet Jonathan and Guillaume. So Jonathan is a software engineer with a unique perspective on decision-making and problem-solving, forged through a background as a poker player. And Guillaume is a director of engineering, lead product engineer, and software engineering consultant, and traveled to more than 40 countries, which helped him to figure a lot of stuff out in terms of life and client relationship and everything else. So, folks, we are super glad to have you on this call. So if you've got a couple insights about the service that you were building at the ground, and what was the idea behind that, and why you've started building that, and like a bit more context about the application, we would appreciate.
For sure. So first of all, thanks for having us and suffering through our very thick French accents the whole call. And so yeah, so Ground came about as I was building another startup around eSIMs, and I was basically being a bit naughty. I was trying to create content, SEO optimized content, and I was trying to copy the competition. And so to do that, I was like, oh, I could use LLMs and see what it spits out. But I wanted to match a certain format and a certain way of doing things, and so I figured out, hey, let's use RAG. That's the first thing I came upon, and I found it pretty challenging. It was a bit of a mess, the whole landscape, and I found it very. You had to figure out a lot of things out, like what embeddings to use, what retrieval technique, the chunking size, all that sort of stuff. And I thought, hey, this is pretty hard. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one to have this problem. Looks like everybody's struggling on it. And that was the start of Llama Index, LangChain, etc. And so it was pretty clear that there was probably a need for a more, let's say, cohesive solution. And the other thing that I knew from experience as an experienced software engineer is that most of the stuff that was there was in Python. And Python is not generally regarded as a good language to productionize with. Obviously, some people do, and that's debatable, but and that's not where most of the engineers are. So we aim to kind of build something that was language agnostic. So that's kind of the whole train of thought around this, making it easier, less decisions for people who want to build a RAG, and make it more available, through a SDK or etc. So that's how the idea came about.
Yeah, so for the context, so that everyone would be on the same page, RAG is basically retrieval augmented generation. And it's a service that, it's a concept that helps your application to get more context regarding the data that you're working with. So for example, you can supercharge your application with some of the custom data of your like clients or like your data sets or something else. And the AI that's running behind the curtains would be able to operate with the correct data, basically reducing hallucinations, relying on like a reliable data that you're using, and etc. So that's for the context. So that's basically how the idea came about. And can you please share a bit about the ground.dev, like the actual startup that you built? So what was the functionality, and what's the basically the application?
So basically we started with the real MVP was you can just input a document. At the start it was just a text document, and you'd be able to do generation on that. So you know, so type a query like you know, what was Paul Graham doing in July 2021, and ideally it would retrieve the correct data and give you an answer, right? So we started with this very basic MVP, and then we started adding features like just more document types, so like PDFs, docs, whatever, using unstructured, and then you know, refining the pipeline itself. And so basically the product itself would have been, so I say would have been because we didn't really release it. Like we came about more information on where the landscape is going, and we decided to end it early, but we can talk about that later, about why we decided that. And it would have been presented, basically the whole aim, who we were aiming for were the early stage founders that were engineers that were looking for a turnkey solution, right? And so it would have been a simple SDK, like a package that you import in your Python code or your TypeScript code. That's the two first languages that we were going to target. And you would just input your documents and be able to kind of ask the same as ChatGPT, right? But with your documents and with up-to-date data, right? So you would be able to just call a simple package API, and it would just be kind of like ChatGPT with your own data, basically.
Yeah. So, and until what point you've built the startup? So did you have like a working API that somebody could use?
Yes. So we had that. Yes.
So idea was that you would basically build an API and would have like kind of UI, for example, something like that, that users who are not familiar, for example, with the code could use, or you were planning to basically rely only on a software package that would be installed into the application, or like what was kind of the functionality regarding the document input?
Go for it, John.
We had one UI mostly for uploading files. So you can go to it and upload files into the RAG manually. You can also do it via software, and you can upload chunks also. Like when you build a RAG, you need to chunk the document into smaller parts first. Try to have like context into each part, and then you embed it and you send it into like vectorize into the database, and that's what you search. That's basically how Google search works also. We have this and some indexing. So all these parts, like you could do manually, and the part that was only done by code is the API call to query and get the answers.
Yeah, that sounds super convenient. And yeah, I guess ChatGPT has something similar, but like I've used ChatGPT's API to retrieve the vector for a specific piece of the text, but I don't know what the current landscape for the ChatGPT data entry right now. So like I think it's kind of similar, but at the same time, you were offering more like flexibility, because so you were able
so you could use it with any LLM basically, right?
Because we had one like the endpoint, you could have the rankings, When you run the query, it's giving you back passages into the documents that it finds a match with. So you have this, and then you can feed this into any LLM, or you could just call straight to LLM.
Yeah, that's like sounds reasonable. And what was basically the reason why you decided to kind of quit and
So I think it's that's a very it's probably a very long answer. Like there's a lot of things that play into it. The landscape is crazy, so that's why it's very interesting too. But like I think one of the main ones is you're building on moving sand below your feet, right? Like it's like there's no one of the most difficult part of building a RAG is that there is no one size fits all solution. All of the techniques that we haven't talked about that you use to retrieve a certain piece of data, they're all specific to your use case, right? So like if you're trying to go through medical data or like laws, law texts, etc., the technique that you're going to use to recover that data and process it is going to be different. And so as such, that's the first part that makes it difficult to build a one-size-fits-all product, because you'd have to have like all these options for each use case. And so of course you can do that, but at the same time, the state of the art is not set yet. Nobody has decided what works best, because something that works in a specific use case doesn't work as well in another use case. For example, like generating entity graphs, knowledge graphs is going to be useful in some areas and not others, etc. And John can talk more to the rest of the other reasons if you
Could I ask a question? Is that possible?
Yes, of course. Of course.
I'm just curious if, as you're reflecting back now, do you think if you had really zeroed in on a specific persona or use case, that would have changed your decision?
Yes, so that was one of the suggestions of another engineer that we talked to. He mentioned it as like moving up the chain. So instead of being an infrastructure startup, you would like go into a niche. And that's obviously something we could have done that we didn't decide to do. But that's a good question. Yes, one way to get out of this situation obviously is to niche down, right? Maybe indeed we went too broad and we're like, hey, let's solve the rack problem. But then there's no rack problem. There's like somebody's trying to do something and we could solve it with a specific piece of technology, right? So that's a great suggestion. Like we could have gone into a niche, but then comes the question, which one, and which one are we familiar with, or which one we can contact people into. And something we didn't mention is that one of the big downsides that we have, both being in Thailand, is that it's very tricky for us to go and ask where the action is going, in person, etc. So I didn't mention this. We're both based in Thailand. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's like really cool question, because I wasn't thinking about that. Like you basically can drill into a niche,
Yes.
preferably the one where the money
exactly
is at.
Yeah, it's always which niche. It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's almost limitless.
Yeah. One thing also is most people, even building things with LLM, but don't know what a RAG is. So already RAG is kind of niche. You always have to explain what it is. And so if you are doing a RAG very specific to something, the market is probably very small, and it's kind of costly to run also. So I'm not sure right now that it's so interesting to get into a niche, also because there's a lot of one of the reasons is there's a lot of fluff in AI right now, and most people building things with LLMs don't really care about the result. They just want to cross a case and like cross a box and say, we have this, now we get into something else.
Yes, some people are using it to get a promotion, basically.
A lot of it. And and many people have a wrong idea about what you can do with LLMs. For example, you will talk about someone who has a project and you like I check the benchmarks for the use case, tell it, and they're like, I think we can do better. That's a common thing. And the truth is, yeah, you will probably have your result around 80% of the time, and not 100. So most people kind of don't want to accept it or don't know how to get around it. That's some of the problems.
Yeah, I think one of the harder things to kind of communicate as an engineer to people who don't know AI and LLMs is the whole fact that it's probabilities, right? Like people don't understand how an LLM works, and it's just predicting the next token, right? So one of the things that happens is that as you add probabilities, they all add up together, and it becomes less likely that you get the same output. And so that's what we call non-deterministic. And then people are used to a deterministic world, right? I push a button and it does X, right? And that's a perfectly reasonable expectation to have of software or of any piece of engineering that you use, right? Like you don't wake up and turn on your car and oh, like today it's decided not to turn on, right? And so yeah, that also makes it a bit tricky to when you hear people like what they're trying to do, etc. You're like, yeah, but it might not work some of the time. Like, who wants to hear that, right? And that's true for their specific use case too. Like, oh, some of the time it might bullshit you, right? And you'd be like, oh, well, that's too bad, right? And especially for very sensitive use cases like medical law. I don't know if you've heard, like some lawyers got in trouble for using LLMs, and it completely made up case studies, and they actually got fined for it, I think, by the judge. Right?
There was a judge in my province, I'm Canadian, who got, I believe, fined for relying on Gen AI.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, fair enough, right? Like it's your professional duty to not do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you're a human. The LLM is not outputting straight into the result. Like you can cross-check what your LLM was saying. So it's
yeah. You're still responsible, right? It's still your job to be like, hey, like, does this make sense? Like, does this case study exist? Right? You shouldn't like completely hand off responsibility to the machine. Yeah.
Yeah, and so another of the things that's happening is the way the space is evolving right now. So when we started, it was a few months ago, and we were not 100% sure of how the LLMs are evolving. Oh, sorry, before I start, like Juan
wants to speak. Yeah.
Hi, thank you guys. I'm a product manager working in insurance, and I want to put in my roadmap down the line maybe to have an LLM that works on helping through the online claim processes, right? That maybe doesn't solve the problem directly with the user, but helps streamline it for the insurance analyst, right? And I think the best way to do that possibly is through a RAG model, where we basically feed a lot of information about how the insurance works, what's being covered, what not, right? How would you think about a workflow for that? Because I'm not an expert in LLMs.
So what a RAG is doing is kind of Google search. So basically, you just build a RAG, you have it on your documents. When people ask a question, it will come up with a ranking, and you have 10 results, 20 results, whatever. And then your analysts look into this and pick the right one and the one that fits. So you get a human touch in it, and you reduce the chances that there's a mistake or the LLM is outputting something wrong, because you don't use a LLM, you just make a search. And it's like doing Google search over your docs. So I think that's the best. And you have human input, so they can cross check everything.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So basically right now, I think we both think that the state that both RAG and LLMs in general is, we think that you still need to have a human in the loop. And as augmenting a human with an LLM is actually pretty useful. So for example, a little bit before like let's say a year ago, I didn't know Golang, right? I didn't code in Go. I was an expert in TypeScript. And I helped myself learn Go by using an LLM, right? I would just tell it, hey, like, how do I do this in Go? And I would get a result, worked out pretty well. And I learned much faster than I would have without an LLM, right? And that's just me staying in the loop, right? Not saying, hey, just write the code for me. And I think that's true for anything else that's currently doable with LLMs. Like you need a human in the loop, and especially for when you're trying to make decisions, right? It's not a decision machine. I would say it's a suggestion machine.
Yeah, you want to keep someone that understands what's going on in the loop. So yeah, for code is the same. The LLM doesn't understand what it's doing. It's just spitting words. And so if you have like code generation, I find it kind of frustrating because there's very often everything looks right, but there's something a little bit off, and then like you don't know why it is. And the code is because it's not made by thinking, the error can be something really trivial that you would not look at, and you're not used to look at when you look at human code. When you look at human code, you're like, oh, there's errors, could be in this, in this, in this. And the error is in something absolutely weird that you did not expect and will not look at. So it makes it easy to pick up, hard to pick up, sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why it's like, it's good to explain the thing. And once you understand it, or to get a prototype and then you delete and rewrite it.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah. As my friend put it, the LLM can be a great CTO if you're basically a one-man startup, and he's basically into that indie hacking thing. So he's like building his products, and when he shows like some pieces of the code to LLM and etc. So that works pretty well. But once he's asking like, please create this chunk of business logic, it's like almost always suboptimal or like not working, or like working but like not in a way he would intend it to be, and like it causes this back and forth multiple times until like something simple would be done. So like he like treats LLM as a CTO, and like in that case yeah, it works. So yeah, I guess basically the issue is that we are not in that stage of the AI development that AI can do things on itself. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's the expectation problem, right? Like what do people expect when you talk to them? Like what do they think you're able to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think we touched on these two things. What else can we
The landscape.
Landscape, yeah.
The way things are moving. So the bullish case for building a RAG as a startup when we started was that LLMs are still improving fast. And so all the big tech would continue working on the LLMs and only the LLMs, because you unlock more improvement by improving your LLM and having like ChatGPT-5 being awesome than building RAGs around ChatGPT-4. So yeah, that was the best case scenario, and this is not happening. What we've seen is ChatGPT 4.0 is a mixture of models. So they don't have a better model, they just use different models in background. One is doing code, one is doing video, one is doing audio and speaking, and they mix them together. So it's like, for me, the meaning of this is that we were on a logarithmic like curve, and we're kind of close to the top, and now it's slowing a lot. It was magic when ChatGPT 3 came out, because it was coming out of nowhere. And suddenly, like between GPT 3 and 4, there's some difference, but like if you look at 4 and 4.0, it's not so crazy. And so what's happening is the companies are building all these things, like OpenAI with the mixture of models and doing tricks using RAGs to improve the results and all these things. And so because they're doing this, they're getting into the infra, and so they're stepping on our yard, you know.
Our small toes. Yeah. So, and also worth mentioning is that OpenAI acquired a company called Rockset, and Rockset was basically kind of a RAG. Like they built a database that allows for information retrieval, and that also hints at what like John is saying, because we're seeing less and less progress comparative to time in LLMs. Companies are starting to say, hey, like, look, well, this is not going fast enough. Like, we need to start looking at the rest of the stack. And they're starting to acquire like vector databases, you know, search, you know, RAGs, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the fact that all the leaders, like the companies, like Rockset, they were in the game before ChatGPT. They were really good at it. They have proprietary technologies. They own the whole thing, like they own the database and they own the RAG and all the, like they were doing information retrieval. And they don't think they can stay on their own and have something that grows and that's profitable, because they sold for a few $100 million. So that's really good if you make this money. But for a company that is a leader in something growing like AI, if they had a hint that they can grow on their own, and they would probably be able to make billions in a few years.
Yeah, much more money, yes.
Yeah, you see all the leaders in different categories of infrastructure in AI that are like trying to sell to the incumbents. Yeah. So yeah, there was this on one side. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, so I guess several months ago, I've seen a TED talk by Andrew Ng. So he's been talking about this huge like wave of AI apps that are coming to the market. And one of the things that he mentioned is that like it's like kind of relatable to what Shona mentioned. So there are big companies like Amazon, Google, Netflix, who are using AI to build their own stuff or to build the services that they would sell to somebody else. But there are always some local pizza stores who would like to predict what kind of ingredients people would like to have in their pizzas, or like some small companies that would like to have a chatbot, etc., etc. And basically, the case is that there always will be like 10-20% margin in the market that you can take advantage of. And usually any niche that you would try to drill in would have this kind of capacity, even for like a super low tier applications that can fulfill a need. So like the question is, yes, like it sounds like everybody's building their own RAG, but at the same time, if you would like kind of look into some niche that probably would be like an easy one to pick, that might work out. But yeah, we've basically discussed that. So yeah, since you're in Thailand, that might be a bit tricky.
Yeah, so also that was the initial insight when we started as well. We were aware that everybody was going after enterprise, and we weren't aiming for enterprise at all. We were aiming for really early stage startups that wanted to play around with RAG and potentially add it to their product, right? But we're doing that, and we're aiming at developers, right? So that's why Shona's point is correct as well. Like, are you sure you want to go for developers, or do you want to like offer a higher end product for a specific niche, right? So that's still something that, you know, like if it comes up, we might explore. But then we've talked to a few people, and like we came on this problem of like expectations and like what is doable and etc. And so yeah. Go for it, Shona.
It's kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier and how, RAG is new to the market. So I'm also a PM, and I'm working on right now a 0 to 1 Gen AI community engagement product. And so we have a data scientist who's exploring a RAG model for us.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm curious about from your perspective, as you were doing research and talking to people, at what point would you predict that LLMs will become, so familiar to people and, so embedded in our daily lives that additions like RAG will also then become language that people become more familiar with? And what I'll share is I work in the K-12 space. Primarily, we're in corporate and public sectors as well, but it was
education.
Education.
Yeah.
It was not until Gen AI. So we've really been AI first. I've been there for a decade, and we've been AI first probably for 7 years. And it wasn't until Gen AI came onto the market that our education leaders would say, "Oh yeah, let me talk to you about prompting, and let's talk AI policies."
So now it's sexy. Now it's sexy.
Yeah, it was the first time they really started asking questions about data security and AI policies, and even though they've probably been subject to these, algorithms for years. So I'm just curious what you think.
That's a really good question inside. I think with the first thing to kind of RAG is kind of a misnomer. Like RAG is just a information retrieval, and like that's a very old problem. Like there's research papers on information retrieval that date back to like 50 years, I think, and that are still very relevant to this day. And like an LLM itself is a retrieval system, right? So like RAG itself is not anything very special, but it's just a technique. And I would even go as far to say that it's kind of a hack. The reason it exists is because LLMs can't retrieve data after the time they've been trained, right? But we have no way to know that will always be the case, right? Like right now, we're just feeding it small bits of like current up-to-date data. But yeah, that's the other thing. Like, is RAG a thing that will stick around? In my opinion, probably not, right? It might very well be part of the model in the future, right? The model would like retrieve the data. It's like do its own RAG, let's say. But yeah, so that's talking about the staying power of the whole idea, even, right? Right.
Well, something that we found out yesterday, literally on a call with our data analysis team, my use case for a RAG model, or let's just say an information retrieval system, was hyper-contextualized information to a specific school district. And at one point we said, oh, let's just Google and see if we can even find what they're talking about. And as we often find in K-12, it wasn't even on the internet, right? And so that was the first thing to me, because we're of course, pleased the models are moving so fast and getting so good so quickly. But for that level of data where it's actually probably in a person's brain or in a stack of papers on someone's desk, that might be the only way we can actually bring it in.
Correct, yes. But then you're not so much solving the retrieval problem. You're solving for the privacy problem. Like who can access this data? How private is it? How sensitive is it? Do I need to remove PII from it? So personally identifiable information.
Oh, it's nothing like that. That's what's interesting. Okay. It's resources that are not available. And so that for me is where I get curious, whether it's RAG or whether it's something else, that kind of percentage of the market that Max was talking about, that's not, not very technical, needs this kind of hyper-contextualized data, but it's not readily available.
Yep. No, that's definitely what RAG is trying to solve, right? It's definitely trying to solve for your own data or your company data, right? Like definitely. So but something that the model hasn't.
You think that problem will disappear?
It might, yeah. It might be just part of the model in the future. Yeah.
Well, we cannot at the same time say we are like stalling as models, and I think RAG is here for quite a while still. Like, yeah, but for your use case, you don't need a specific RAG. You can just input it into Amazon's RAG or Google or Microsoft or OpenAI. Yeah, and one of the things with the competition with the tech giants is there was Sundar Pichai and Zuckerberg interviewed yesterday and asked about all the money they are pouring into AI. Overall, the market, there's been $700 billion of investment in AI and only 7 billion of revenues from it. So it's losing a lot of money. And Sundar Pichai and Mark Zuckerberg explained the same thing, that they see AI as being a prominent part of how we use internet in the 10 to 15 next years. And they really don't care about losing money on it for building infrastructure and developing it. They think it's going to be worth at some point in the future. It's like getting in the cloud technologies before 2010, you know. So they are okay losing billions in AI, and so yeah, can you really compete into this when they have like teams of thousands of machine learning engineers and everything, and they just throw them at the problems?
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, you have universities. There's a paper recapitulating the state of RAG, and there's 70 different type of RAGs, and they all have like a slight variation, and they all step on top of each other. And there's like this new one has like a 5% more on this, and they just have like very small improvements. So if you were to like target, for example, a specific niche, you would be rebuilding your RAG almost constantly.
Yeah, for every niche. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that like the thing that I can see might give a competitive edge is basically building a small models that are already trained on a data that you would like to like for the model to work with. That probably would make more sense. And also I've seen a business that offered custom small local LLMs that you basically can train on your own data and embed into like your business. Yeah, but that was like super expensive from what I remember, because they were like running like a big part of like cloud infrastructure to train those models. They've had those super smart data scientists who were able to figure out whether the model is like whether the training results are okay or not. Plus the data kind of segmentation and labeling was like a huge part of the issue, because they had to basically train the model on like a correct data plus validate the model and test it, etc. And the data sets like should have been prepared in a like
and basically
way.
it's good that you mentioned that, because you face this problem both in RAGs and in fine-tuning and data science. All of the companies that you know are sitting on troves and troves of data, they can't really use it just because most of it is trash or not labeled, or you know, like put in the right place, whatever you want to call it. But that when I say like RAG might disappear, this is what I mean. I mean like maybe it will become just fine-tuning. And like one thing that is evolving though in AI and LLMs in general right now is like the cost of everything is trending towards zero, right? So the cost of inference is already gone down massively since the start, and the cost of training will probably trend towards zero as well, right? but yeah, you still have this problem of like, where is the data? Is it clean? Like, can I use it, etc. Yeah, still the same problem.
And it's the same. Like also you have, if you build a RAG, the price of RAGs with Amazon and everything is going to be almost zero also. So how do you make money for yourself? And on top of that, if you want to be able to compete and to permanently build, you would need to raise money, very likely.
Yep.
If you do infra. And as soon as you raise money, you are in a cycle where you have to grow to 100 million ARR, and then you start to like not be able to stay in a niche. So that's a complicated business decision. There's many actually RAGs that are being funded. Like almost every VC has at least one RAG. Every batch there's a RAG in Y Combinator since the ChatGPT started, kind of. So yeah, all these guys, I don't know how many will pivot or how they handle this, how many will, if some will make it. I'm interested to see how it.
To see, yeah. So one of the things we were, John and I were kind of talking about before this podcast is the kind of what we call the carcinization of the space. So carcinization is like when everything evolves into a crab, you know, and like there's been many species of crab re-evolved over time because they face the same pressures. And this is kind of the same in AI right now. Like you can see that. So for example, like I'm going to give you two really quick examples. So the last update that Quadrant, which is the vector database that we use, that they made, they're slowly inching towards being a RAG themselves when they were a vector database at the start. And another startup that we use, which is Unstructured, which was just a document processing startup, is now doing ETL. So like ETL is like ingesting your data into the unstructured, and then they're doing connectors to the vector database. So there's just like one step away from also themselves being a storage, right? So like everybody is starting to try and offer everything, but and like John mentioned, in a space where you're competing against AWS, Azure, etc., who are experts at doing it, and who will capture the enterprise market because they're already compliant, etc. They're already using AWS. It's going to be just a click away, just a Terraform file away to add that functionality. And they have the trust factor. Like, why would they trust your small startup when they can just trust the big incumbent, right? So there's definitely a inching towards the same kind of set of solutions, and everybody's trying to become the infrastructure for AI, as opposed to just being super good at one thing in the whole stack, right? Because it's a very, like I said, like the initial idea for Ground was that, oh, this looks like a very complicated landscape. Like, let's try and simplify it, right? And turns out I'm not that smart. Everybody has thought about it, right? Like, it's an obvious kind of pick, right? And that's where we go into the territory of kind of calling it the tar pit idea a little bit, because if everybody has thought about it and everybody thinks it's cool, it's probably not a good idea for the reasons we kind of outlined today, and a few others that we can talk about. But yeah.
And the thing about the databases moving into RAG is there are all the vector database, they were made for AI, and a lot of them are being kind of kicked by Postgres. Like Postgres released vectors, and not only Postgres, all the main database are doing the vector search now. There's also there is it's Neo4j doing graph
Neo4j
database, and there's a paper that was out this week, no, earlier this month, and it's talking about the last 20 years of database. And in it, they talk about the graph DBs, and if you use DuckDB and the last update on Postgres that enables graph search, they have like they are 10% faster than Neo4j that is doing only graph. So all these new databases that are into the LLM ecosystem are being pushed from the only database thing into evolving and providing more and more value to people building LLMs. So yeah, you got into in between, like you have OpenAI and all the big guys, and on the other side you have all that database that already have like raised hundreds of millions for some. And everyone is starting to converge and doing RAG and fine-tuning. Yeah.
They're trying to justify their existence now by adding more features. Yeah.
Yeah, I've also got this feeling that basically startups are pivoting left and right, and the ones that are doing good are basically the ones that filled in a niche, were the first ones. And for example, we've discussed with Jonathan the PG Vector, the like kind of vector provider for the Postgres, and they blew up, and right now they are like doing super good because everybody's trying to like integrate with them, because they were like basically a simple startup back then and like a project basically. And right now, like they were able to make things super convenient, because like why I'm personally interested in hearing your opinion about RAG, because I'm like I've been building a pet project that was dependent on the PG Vector and the RAG in general. So the whole idea was that like the product, like the project that I'm building is consuming the information about the software product that you are building and helps you to work with tasks. And for example, like the primary use case why I've decided to move into that is that because myself included and a lot of my friends who are in the IT had the same issue when their customers were sending like a huge emails talking about what features they would like to have, and usually those emails were like they've had a lot of different details, they were like noisy, etc., etc. And the idea was to collect that feedback and based on the information about the software project be able to parse this email or piece of the feedback into a small like doable items in your Jira, for example, and basically convert huge portions of data using the LLM that has some like RAG functionality in it, and transfer it into simple tasks. But yeah, since like you've discussed the whole idea about RAG dying out, that probably is a bit too late to publish that project, I think. Because...
No, you'd be fine. Like right now, it's still relevant, but like you always say, you know, like you can't go wrong with Postgres, right? You can't underestimate the power of defaults. And obviously it's much less friction. I think one of the bigger challenges as a software engineer when you're productionizing something is having all of these different texts. You have to manage how they scale, how they talk to each other. Is there a gRPC API? Is it REST? All that sort of stuff. And obviously just being able to do it in Postgres with what you already know, with SQL, all that sort of stuff. That's obviously going to win out. I mean, in my opinion, it's going to win out over yet another thing that I need to deploy, that I need to maintain, that I need to scale, make sure it doesn't break in production, etc. When Postgres is like, you know, the thing that everybody knows and works fairly well. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's only one thing to maintain and to scale,
Yeah.
and to
you
don't. If you have one vector database and Postgres, why not keep the vector database and keep Postgres?
Yeah, makes sense. Folks, does anyone have any questions regarding the RAG, AI, startups, etc.? Yeah, if you have any, please raise your hand. And yeah, I guess since we are moving towards the end of the call, folks, I've heard that like you're a bit like it seems like you're a bit skeptical about the like AI startups in general, because like personally, I like myself included, because every startup tries to check that checkbox, as Guillaume, you've mentioned. And what do you think, like, whether those AI startups would die out the same way as like a lot of crypto projects died like several years ago, or like dot-coms vanished at the beginning of 2000s? Like, what's your take on this whole thing?
I think definitely, definitely. But yeah, but that's not a bad thing. Like it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be trying. I think like the effort itself and trying something new, playing around with stuff. That's where innovation comes from, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing that you have to have 100,000 startups fail before you find something that's worth finding, right?
Yeah, one of the things that puts us in this position is that we started building it and we got excited because it's fun and it's interesting, and so we just got into it and we forget to find clients.
Hey, you need to sell. You need to sell this thing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like that's the default bias of software engineers. You like most companies don't fail because of code. They fail because of you're not selling. You're not finding the right audience, right? And that's obviously as a software engineer, you always want to build. Super excited to get into the code, but that's obviously that's not where you should start, right? Like that definitely more. And that's a learning for us, right? Like
Yeah, it was kind of an excuse to just start building.
build
For
something
me,
cool. Yeah.
I was looking at it. I was looking at LLMs, and I was interested into it. And then I had a job, so I didn't have so much time to seriously get into learning all this, like the machine learning side and all the embeddings, retrieval, all this. And so I got I was terminated with my job last year at the end of the year, and then I was just looking for opportunities, and when he had some issue and he was like, hey, yeah, I think I have a problem, like I should build a RAG or something. And I was like, oh, really? If it's a problem for you, it must be a problem for a lot of people. Let's get into it. And then we got into it. But yeah, we learned a lot. So yeah, that's worth something at least.
Yeah. And we get to talk to you today. So
yeah, which is great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, folks. Yash, please go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm so sorry I was getting out because of the network. But what did we finally summarize? I mean, if it is not RAG, is it vector DB that we should use? Because eventually we will be powering our LLMs with some sort of customized data.
Yash, sorry for interrupting. I guess the microphone is super noisy. Yeah, we can barely hear you.
Is it better now?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
So I'm sorry I was in and out because of the network. I just wanted to ask, what did we finally conclude on RAGs? Understand that RAGs may not be the future. I've been going through this whole conversation. What is the alternative? Because eventually we will be powering our LLMs with something, right? Some customized set of data, right? Could it be vector DB or could it be a simple relational database powering my LLM with some middle layer, right?
I think it's maybe we gave that impression, but it's not correct to say that RAGs are not the future, are not relevant. It's more like that it's a difficult problem to solve, and that in the future it might not be what you use, but it's more not just RAGs but LLMs in general. What you can build with it right now is basically amounts to just like chatbots. So if you're building a chatbot and you want, to fetch your data and have better answers, then, you can still use RAG, right? But if you're building something more complex, then you need to reevaluate, like, am I going to use an LLM or something else? Or is my use case even possible to this day, right? Thanks, Camille.
So there's one thing is, even let's stick to the chatbot example that are getting pretty complex, right? So let us say I had a very simple example of one of engineering equipment company, right? They were dealing with ball bearings. and they wanted to discuss something about the chatbot, right? Now, the conversational aspect of one simple question add a depth of further, let's say, 10 to 15 questions, right? I mean, it is engineering, uh, uh, you know, it is pretty complex to answer all the questions, right? So, what I felt even for a chatbot in that case, whether RAG is the best case or do we have to go with
Yes,
something else that,
yes,
yeah.
yes. So RAG could help, but again, you're still facing the problem that the LLM is making probable errors. And so especially in the context of engineering and say like stuff like ball bearing, like, is it giving me the right product? Is it giving me the right measurements? Has it understood my query?
Yep.
And then you're back at like, isn't it better to do a Google search or like a traditional search where it just gives me, hey, I need this ball bearing for this, you know, these dimensions, this like
Yes,
type
exactly.
of oil, etc. So like that's where you're into the systems that we already use are better than whatever LLM plus RAG would be at this point in time. Is my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's data that's not public, you can just use only a RAG and as retrieval.
A retrieval.
Yeah.
So and basically then you're just back into a normal database, and it doesn't need to be vectors. It can just be, you know, matching on specifications. And so yeah, and so then you're trying to find a solution. You have a solution in search of a problem, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can find a solution that's not using AI, like
Do
go
it.
with it.
Do it.
You
Yeah.
have something deterministic against something non-deterministic. So like don't go with something AI for the sake of it, unless maybe it gets your promotion or money, you know, but
or learning or whatever. Yeah.
So, yeah, it has that angle actually. To be very honest, in my organization knows it that I need it for my learning and my promotion. So what I have decided is so to combine rule-based engine and LLM.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
LLM would choose what rule-based engine to trigger. I mean, this is what high level what I have thought of as of now.
I mean, you can use you can use a real database and just have it spit out, you know, like a random text and say, hey, I found this for you, you know, like there's so many ways to go
So
about it.
let's just say there are questions, right? Let's say X company ball bearing did not work for me last time, right? Now even questions of this level, a relational database cannot answer,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely it has to be LLM, but the only piece I'm still missing out is what to go along with that LLM for it to make sense.
Right. Well, yeah, you can give it a try for RAG and LLMs, but yeah, I'm not giving you too much. Yeah.
RAG itself, you can just see it as a private Google search. That's what it's doing. Yeah. So if you can choose between 10 answers and pick the best one, just go for this. Yeah. RAG is basically only this. It's like information retrieval, and it spits out a list of responses.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dash.
Okay, folks, thank you very much, Guillaume, Jonathan. Super packed call, and hope to see you in a couple, I guess, several months with yet another AI startup that would blow up. And yeah, please
Hopefully.
stay with us.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much, Max, and thanks everyone for listening to us and asking questions. That was great.
Yeah, thanks everyone. See ya.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.